Hello and good morning and welcome. Welcome to my garden podcast. So I've decided to rename my episodes, rename this series of podcasts to now garden podcast instead of lockdown podcast, just to give it more of a positive slant to it. And yeah, so I haven't done any grounding work for the past few days. I've been really busy working, but this morning I just thought, oh my gosh, I have to go into the garden because it's such a beautiful day today. Oh my goodness, the sun is shining. It's really warm. I'm not even wearing a sweater or anything. I just got a t-shirt on, cropped leggings, so I got sun on my legs and my arms, and so I can make all that lovely vitamin D. And the sky is so blue. It's gorgeous. And there are no clouds, and it's really peaceful as well. I can just hear birds singing occasionally, but it's just really quiet and it's just really nice. And I thought this is the perfect opportune moment for me to record a new episode for my podcast. So I've missed talking to you guys. So welcome. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about esoteric information, bordering on conspiracy theories and alternative ideas that will really challenge core belief systems. And so I just want to put a warning: if you do have really strong core beliefs, whether that's spirituality or religious, you might not want to listen to this particular episode, because I don't want to upset anyone. I don't want to trigger anybody, because the stuff that I will be talking about, it's really out there and it's not for everybody. It really isn't. So it's really esoteric. It's really, really out there. But it's just stuff that I've been researching and I've been reading, and I just really want to discuss it, just to get it out there for myself, as in not get it out there as in widely to the public, but just as in get it out of my head and and to just discuss it with you guys that are open to such information. But yes, again, if you have really strong core beliefs, spiritual or religious, you might want to skip this episode, because I don't want to upset you or trigger you. Okay, so now that all my disclaimers and warnings have been done, let's delve into it. So I'm going to be touching on a couple of things. I brought out my iPad because I want to read some snippets from articles that I've been reading online, and also I brought out David Icke's book, Children of the Matrix. So I just want to put a disclaimer with David Icke. I think there might be a lot of truth in what he's saying, but also I have been, not that I've personally been warned, but I have read that he could be an misinformation agent as well. But that doesn't mean that what he's saying isn't true, and it doesn't mean that all of it is disregarded. What it could mean is that there's a lot of truth, but there's also misinformation between the truth as well. So I'm really open to reading information and studying information from a perspective, even if I don't completely believe it, and even if I know that some of the information isn't really true. But there will be elements of truth within disinformation, within misinformation. So I just wanted to put that caveat out there. I like to study lots of different perspectives, lots of different things, just to then build my own belief system. I think that's the stage where I'm at the moment. I just want to find information that resonates for me personally, and then build that belief system for me that gives me peace of mind in my heart and in my mind. So I think that's something that everyone should do. We should all have our own ideas that give us comfort and that we believe in. And, no one should impose their thoughts or ideas onto another human being, because it's a really personal journey. It's a really personal thing. Ultimately, we're all striving for the same thing, which is figuring out, who we are, why do we exist? What is the meaning of life? Where did we come from? How do we, connect with true divine source, with God, with our creator? What is, the universe? All these, philosophical questions that we all have at the core of our very being. And ultimately, I think we all just want to work on our, relationship with, with divine source. Yeah, I mean, unless you're an atheist and then you want to figure out how did we come into being and, stuff like that. So, okay, let's get to it. It's a very long introduction. Sorry about that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to discuss is just a couple of things from the book Children of the Matrix. I'm not going to read all of it, obviously. I'm just going to read a couple of sentences and paragraphs from the first chapter, just to give you an idea what the book is about. If you read my previous post, I discussed how I found this book. So it was back in 2002, maybe. It was, I don't know, maybe a couple of years after that. It was around the time when I was completely obsessed with The Matrix, because it was released in 1999, and I think I must have watched it on DVD. I'm not sure I watched it at the cinema, but 1 second. Okay, so as I was saying, I was completely obsessed with the film The Matrix, and I have heard that it was a concerted effort from, the light side to bring out films to try to awaken us of the reality that we are in. So it was kind of like a metaphor, an allegory. So I don't know if I'm using that word correctly. I do that sometimes. I hear a word and I think, oh yeah, I can use that word too, and I don't know if I'm using it correctly. But yeah, so I was just strolling around a bookshop, and the title of the book just caught my eye because it had the word Matrix. So anything that was like related to the Matrix, I was like, yeah, I want to know. So I picked it up, and it was called Children of the Matrix: How an Interdimensional Race Has Controlled the World for Thousands of Years and Still Does. So I was like, okay, this is intriguing. And then I read the blurb and I was like, okay, I'm buying it. So this was, I can't remember when I bought it, but it was early 2000s. And the book was, this particular edition, it was first published in 2001, I think. Yeah, first published in May 2001. And then this particular copy that I have, it was reprinted March 2002. So it cost me £16 back then. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the blurb just to give you an idea of what this book is about. So David Icke talks about how we are born into a world that is controlled by unseen forces that have plagued and manipulated humanity for thousands of years. And he talks about how, you might look around and think what you see is real, but in truth, you are living in an illusion that's designed to keep you in a mental, emotional, and spiritual prison cell. So it then talks about how David Icke exposes these forces and their methods of human control and reveals a fantastic web of global manipulation orchestrated by forces beyond this physical realm. He exposes the hidden bloodlines through which other dimensional entities live and operate unseen among us. And he shows how the bloodlines of the royal, political, and economic rulers of today are the same as those who ruled as the kings and queens of ancient times. And yeah. So he's like, the truth is not only out there, much of it is right here. So in this book, he says that he lifts the veil of secrecy that has maintained humanity in manipulated ignorance for so long. So yeah, I read that blurb and I was like, yeah, I'm so buying it. And I started to read it, and then some of the stuff I was like, no, I don't agree with that. I don't believe that. And then I kind of stopped reading it because I just got busy with my degree and I had to do lots of studying. So I didn't really finish the book. I just read bits of it, bits and pieces. But now that, with global events right now, I kind of intrigued to revisit the book and try to decipher what resonates with me and what doesn't. So I'm totally open to, reading it, but then picking out things that, yeah, that could be true. Oh no, that is not true, and I don't believe that, and that could be deliberate misinformation. So I'm just going to read from the first chapter and some random bits as well, just to give you an overview of the type of concepts that David Icke has been talking about for the past 30 years. I mean, hats off to him, regardless of whether he is, an agent or not, he has been persecuted and ridiculed. And, it takes a lot of strength to really put your ideas out there that are really, really out there. And, for 30 years, and now, finally feels vindicated for the stuff that he's been warning. And the stuff that he's been warning has actually come to pass and been really accurate. So, respect to him, regardless of whether there is deliberate misinformation within the truths that he does talk about. He has really put himself out there. So, okay, respect for that. But yeah, like people always say, question everything, question, everyone, and don't believe anything. Don't believe everything one person says, basically, because even though there's some elements of truth, what he's saying, some of the stuff, it kind of puts up a red flag, and I'm like thinking, is that part of an agenda? Is that part of a psyops? Is that, I'm going to delve into it later on, but it's the whole concept of, I don't want to talk about it straight off the bat, but basically what I've been learning is, there's this idea that there are these beings. I don't know what their origin are. Some people say that they're interdimensional beings. Others say they're extraterrestrial, supernatural beings, but they go by different names, reptilians. And just recently I heard about the term Archons. And so the idea is that they feed off on the negative energy from humanity. So someone sent me an article that Cameron Day wrote about the Demiurge, which I never even heard of. I never knew about that concept, but it was a really interesting concept. I read the article. I don't believe most of what he's written, but some of the stuff he wrote was really interesting, which I will talk about later on in the next part. But just as a summary, the concept is, let's just talk about it in a theoretical fantasy sort of way, The idea is these beings, archons, they feed off on negative energy from humans, like fear and anger and things like that. And they will orchestrate events so that there is discourse and there is fighting between the light side and the dark side. And then they also orchestrate false light teams as well to battle against true light and to battle against the dark side. So if you kind of think of it like that, and it's cyclical as well, because they don't always want just despair and hopelessness and depression, because then it's the cycle that they feed on, the up and down. So it's the fight between the light and the dark that they feed off on. That's the concept I've gotten so far. So, okay, I'm going to end this particular part before I move on to the next bit, because it's coming up to 15 minutes. Okay, catch you in the next part. Hello, and welcome back to my garden podcast where I'm going to be talking about esoteric and conspiracy ideas and theories. So we're continuing with the previous part, so discussing a few concepts of David Icke from the book Children of the Matrix, how an interdimensional race has controlled the world for thousands of years and still does. So this book was reprinted in 2002. So I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs. I have to say, it feels really nice to be grounding again. Just really nice. And so we've got Easter bank holiday coming up. Yay! Not that we can go anywhere or anything like that, which is a shame. But we do the best of what we've got. So I'm definitely going to be spending my mornings in the garden, recording podcasts and grounding. So I'll make the most of that before I work. So we've got Friday off, and then Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday off as well. But I'm going to be working. But I will make time to spend time in the garden because it's just really nice. And I really like talking to you guys. Okay, let's get back to the book. Enough of me rambling. Okay, life beyond the bubble. So I'm just going to read a couple of sentences from the first chapter. There are two things you need if you are to uncover and communicate what is really happening in the world. One is to be free of any dogmatic belief system. The second is not to give a damn what people think and say about you, or at least not to let that influence your decisions. I think that's really, really true, because when you step out of your core belief systems, it's almost like you're an outlaw, and you can be shunned by family and friends because it kind of threatens their belief system as well. And people don't like to people like to be comforted with their belief systems and not to be challenged, because it then shakes their whole life and the ground that they're stood upon. So yeah. Without number one, you will never go into the bizarre areas that are necessary to understand the forces that control this planet. Once you are faced with information that demolishes your belief system, you will begin to edit what you have discovered and refuse to go where it is taking you. Without number two, you will never communicate what you have found, because you will be terrified of the consequences for you from the reaction of your friends, family, and the public in general. That is very, very true, because, we are social creatures and we don't want to, be outcast for our, beliefs, if we're like really thinking and believing in things that are really out there. There's a difference between belief and knowing. There's a podcast, Crow777, and his tagline is, "Belief is the enemy of the knowing." And I didn't quite understand that when I first read it, but now I get it, because what you believe doesn't necessarily represent universal truth. I mean, it can, but there's a difference between knowing something and believing something. Believing requires faith, but knowing is it's like, I don't know, not evidence, but it's more concrete. So, you are about to read a book by someone who will go wherever the information takes him, and who, thanks to hard and extreme experience in the early 1990s, let go of the concern what other people might think of him. And so we are going to enter some apparently bizarre and outrageous areas of thought and documented evidence. If you have a belief system to defend, please don't waste your time and money. This is not for you. But in truth, what you are going to hear is not outrageous at all. It just appears to be so because it is so different from the conditioned norm. Crazy and insane are words used throughout history to describe people and ideas that are simply different, and different does not mean wrong. So many condemned and ridiculed ideas in the past have later become conventional wisdom. First they ridicule you, then they condemn you, then they say they knew you were right all along. That's really true as well. I heard a snippet from YouTube. I think Roseanne Barr, I don't know what she was talking about, but she was saying that, if you are one of the first to talk against a mainstream narrative that everyone on the planet believes, but you're the one of the first, the front line to challenge it, people will hate you. They will outright, because they see you as a threat. But then 2 years later, everyone will be saying the same thing as you, but they will have forgotten that you said it, in the beginning. So this book is designed to pull together the evidence and background of the extraterrestrial, interterrestrial, and interdimensional control of planet Earth for thousands of years to the present day. So I've also heard about the concept of how we're coming to a completion of planet Earth after 2,000 and so years, and how all, there's a lot of attention apparently from the universe on planet Earth right at this moment, because we are at the end of the cycle of completion. And Karen Turpin, I can highly recommend her YouTube channel. I absolutely love what she talks about. She mentions how, the Earth was destined to naturally ascend after, it was coming to the end of its completion cycle, and it was just naturally going to ascend to the next level, and that was going to be that started in 2012. So then it was going to start to naturally ascend around between the year 2017 and 2020. But sometime between 2017 and 2020, that timeline of that natural ascension got hijacked. And so there's now two timelines. So we've got the negative Armageddon timeline, which the dark side are trying to bring online as such. And then we've got the positive natural ascension timeline, which the light side are trying to manifest. So I know it's really esoteric information, and you're probably thinking, what is going on? So it's okay if you don't believe in this stuff, and it's okay if you don't, you just think it's a bunch of, woo-woo. That's totally fine. Everyone is entitled to their own belief system, and what you believe, your thoughts actually creates your reality. So your version of reality, this probably isn't, it's probably not relevant. So that's totally fine. Which is actually really interesting when she said that between 2017 and 2018 that the course of the natural timeline went off course, because during that time is when I really started having my spiritual awakening. It started around 2017, and then I awakened. I mean, I've always been aware of all this esoteric information ever since I was a child. But I really got into it at the end of 2018, and then studied a lot throughout 2019. I mean, back then I was just like, oh, this is just, really fun, interesting, and it's all theory. But now it's like, it's not theory anymore. This is like really happening in real life. And it's really bizarre. I almost feel like, am I really in this dimension? Did I wake up in the wrong dimension? The world has just changed so much, so rapidly. But, there's a lot of people in the spiritual community saying, oh, finally feeling, vindicated and validated for what's happening, because we're seeing concrete evidence. I mean, not everybody is seeing it, because not everybody is a vibrational match to see those things behind the veil. But for those that can see it, it's like, okay, this stuff is actually real. It's not theory anymore. So I really like how he ends that particular introduction, and how he says, please remember that what you read here is simply information. It is not compulsory to accept it, and the last thing I am trying to do is persuade you to believe anything. What you believe is your business, not mine. Have I got all the answers? Of course not. Do I have some of them? See what you think. So, I do really appreciate that, he has gathered all this information, and he's dedicated his life to bringing a different perspective and some truths to, mainstream public. So, I really do appreciate that. I have learned a lot from him. Like I said, I don't believe everything he says, but there is a lot of stuff that I do think could be true, that I've seen evidence of personally. So, yeah, so but like with anything, you take what resonates for you personally. Someone on YouTube, a spiritual teacher, I can't remember how you pronounce his name, but it's a really good channel. He talks about how, look for something that resonates for you. That's all, we can do. And then, work on that. And it doesn't matter what other people think or, believe in. What matters is what you believe and what resonates for you personally, because we are all individual beings. We're all very, very unique, and we all will have different ideas and beliefs, and no two people will think and believe in the same thing on every single subject, because we are all unique. We all have our own unique soul signatures. So what I personally like to do is I like to take elements from different things and then kind of build my own system of, knowings and beliefs. Okay, so just going to take he's the first page of the second chapter, The Matrix, is a dialogue, the scene from The Matrix, which is pretty awesome. So I'm just going to read out this dialogue because it is really, really good. So, The Matrix. So I think this is Morpheus talking to Neo. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something very wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about? The Matrix? Do you know what that is? Do you know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is a world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. Born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch, a prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. I'm trying to free your mind, Neo, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it. That's really true, actually. When, no one can awaken you. You have to do it yourself. And not everyone wants to be awakened, because you go through a dark night of the soul. You go through a depression stage, and it's really difficult on our psyche. It's not for everyone. I mean, eventually, hopefully, everyone will awaken, but everyone is different levels of awakening, and that's fine, because not everyone can be awakened at the same time at the same level, because we need some sort of stability in the world as well. And, I'm not explaining it really well. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter. Okay, so the next chapter is a transcript of a dialogue. So Don Juan, the Mexican Yaku Indian shaman, tells Carlos Castaneda the following. We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our lord and master. It has rendered us docile, helpless. If we want to protest, it suppresses our protest. If we want to act independently, it demands that we don't do so. I have been beating around the bush all this time, insinuating to you that something is holding us prisoner. Indeed, we are held prisoner. So because it's coming up to 15 minutes, I'm going to continue this in the next part. Okay, bye for now. So hello and welcome back to part 3. So I'm reading a couple of paragraphs and discussing Children of the Matrix by David Icke. So I'm just reading the dialogue between a Mexican Indian shaman. So, in response, he says, the other guy says, this was an, oh no, the guy is continuing, the shaman guy. So he's saying, this was an energetic fact for the sorcerers of ancient Mexico. They took us over because we are food for them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we rear chickens in chicken coops, the predators rear us in human coops, humaneros. Therefore, their food is always available to them. And the other guy says, Carlos, no, this is absurd, Don Juan. What you're saying is something monstrous. It simply can't be true for sorcerers or for average men or for anyone. And then Don Juan asks calmly, why not? Why not? Because it infuriates you? You haven't heard all the claims yet. I want to appeal to your analytical mind. Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradictions between the intelligence of man, the engineer, and the stupidity of his systems of beliefs, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior. Sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of belief, our ideas of good and evil, our social mores. They are the ones who set up our hopes and expectations and dreams of success or failure. They have given us greed and cowardice. It is the predators who make us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. But how can they do this, Don Juan, Carlos asks, somehow angered further by what Don Juan was saying. Do they whisper all that in our ears while we are asleep? No, they don't do it that way. That's idiotic, Don Juan said, smiling. They are infinitely more efficient and organized than that. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver, stupendous of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist. A horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Do you hear me? The predators give us their mind, which becomes our mind. The predator's mind is barrack, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. I know that even though you have never suffered hunger, you have food anxiety, which is none other than the anxiety of the predator, who fears that any moment now its maneuver is going to be uncovered and the food is going to be denied. Through the mind, which after all is their mind, the predators inject into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them, and they ensure in this manner a degree of security to act as a buffer against their fear. The sorcerers of ancient Mexico were quite ill at ease with the idea of when the predator made its appearance on earth. They resonated that man must have been a complete being at one point, with stupendous insights, feats of awareness that are mythological legends nowadays, and then everything seems to disappear, and we have now a sedated man. What I'm saying is that we have against us is not a simple predator. It is very smart and organized. It follows a methodical system to render us useless. Man, the magical being that is destined to be, is no longer magical. He is an average piece of meat. There are no dreams for man but the dreams of an animal who is being raised to become a piece of meat, trite, conventional. Okay, so I'm just going to read a couple of more sentences and then I'm going to move on to another thing, because otherwise I'm just going to end up reading from this book only, and I want to touch on a couple of other things. Okay. This chapter is called The Plot. Many thousands of years ago, way back in prehistory, there was a highly developed civilization in the Pacific, which has become known as Lemuria. That's really interesting because Magenta Pixie talks about Lemuria, and yeah, I never heard about that before, but I must have read it in the book, but totally forgotten about it. Or Mu. These people and others also founded another great culture on a landmass in the Atlantic, which we know as Atlantis. I actually have a book on Atlantis. I'll try to find it. The knowledge that created these advanced societies, the knowledge that built the fantastic and unexplainable ancient structures like the Great Pyramid and other amazing sites around the world, came from the stars, extraterrestrials of many varieties. Some were tall, blonde, blonde-haired, blue-eyed types, while others took a reptilian form. These and others came here from constellations like Orion, Draco, Andromeda, Lyra, and Bootis, and other locations like the Pleiades, Sirius, Vega, Zeta, Reticula, Arcturus, Aldebaran, and elsewhere. It's really interesting because I'm only recently started, like in the last year, heard about these extraterrestrials, but I must have read it. I mean, I did read it back in 2002, but it just didn't click. I think back then there wasn't any information on YouTube about any of this stuff, so I just read it in the book and then kind of forgot about it and just went over my head, I think. I'm just going to describe the reptilians, which are tall, mostly humanoid type race with snake-like eyes and skin, and they are connected to the classic greys with the big black eyes, which have become the very symbol of the ET. Often these various extraterrestrial factions battle for supremacy in the legendary wars of the gods. These technologically advanced beings were believed to be gods by their technology and flying craft. By the way, for those who find it impossible to conceive of intelligent life forms and humanoids taking a reptilian form, ponder on the words of the cosmologist Carl Sagan. There are more potential combinations of DNA, physical forms, than there are atoms in the universe. On that basis, given the fantastic diversity of the reptilian species on the Earth alone, it would be amazing if there were not reptilians of a humanoid and intelligent variety. So these gods, as in little g, in quotation marks, or you can just see them as higher beings, interbred with each other and the more primitive earth people, and these unions are recorded in endless ancient accounts. These were the sons of God who interbred with the daughters of men to seed the hybrid race, the Nephilim, as described in the Old Testament book of Genesis. The most important interbreeding was between the reptilians and the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nordic peoples, both of extraterrestrial origin, as an alliance was formed between factions of these races. The union produced what has been called the Aryan or noble race, the master race of the Nazis. This is the fusion of the Nordic and reptilian DNA, the genetic code that decides physical characteristics, and as the ancient records confirm, it was these royal bloodlines, the reptilian Nordic hybrids, that were placed in the positions of ruling royal power in the thousands of years before known history. They were the kings and queens who claimed the divine right to rule because of their bloodline, the bloodline of gods. These ancient royal lines in places like Egypt, Sumer, and the Indus Valley had a white skin and often blue eyes, yet they were known as the Dragon Kings or Serpent Kings by those who knew the secret of their hybrid nature. That's really interesting. I didn't know about that. I mean, I did know about the Nordics and aliens and the reptilians, but I didn't know there was like hybrids as well. The rabbit hole just kept getting larger and larger. It's really good that I'm like talking about it and discussing it with you guys, because it kind of just like it makes it easier for me to like kind of understand. But yeah, he talks about a lot of stuff, so I'm just gonna end it there, because otherwise I'm just gonna keep reading it and I don't want to bore you guys. So I just want to touch on a couple of things before I leave this book. The Illuminati. I mean, everyone's heard about the Illuminati. So they're the elite families, no more than 13 at the peak of the pyramid, created to manipulate the system of control through a network of secret societies. This network and bloodline have become known as the Illuminati, the illuminated ones. So we're actually praising them when we call them the Illuminati. In other words, they are illuminated into knowledge that everyone else is denied. The Illuminati is an organization within all significant organizations. It's like a council. All the major secret societies feed carefully chosen recruits into the Illuminati, and these are the ones you find in positions of power throughout the world. So most Freemasons never progress higher than the bottom 3 levels of degree, the so-called blue degrees. They have no idea what their organization is being used for. So only the people right at the top of the pyramid know. So it's kind of like on a need-to-know basis. So that's how it's like compartmentalization. So they have no idea what their organization is being used for. And only the tiny few, all from a particular bloodline, move through the top of their individual secret society into the Illuminati degrees above that. These are the levels into which all the major secret societies feed. Yet at least 95% of the members have no idea that these levels even exist, never mind who is in them and what the actual agenda is. So it all comes from the top, and then it's like down and down and down. So, and then he talks about the sheeple. Wait. Before I talk about that, so I just want to talk about the bloodline. So the Illuminati bloodlines are all genetically connected through hybrid DNA, a genetic fusion caused by the interbreeding of a reptilian race with humanity and the Nordic extraterrestrial race. This interbreeding began hundreds of thousands of years ago and continues to present day. If you're hearing this for the first time, this sounds really bizarre and crazy. It sounds to the conditioned view of reality. So yeah, it's really, really out there. But so this is really interesting. Remember, this book was published in 2001. Listen to this part. That agenda demands a world government, central bank, currency and network. A ridiculous conspiracy theory. Oh really? Well, have another look around you and you'll see that this is happening today, now. The agenda is to take over the planet. So then he talks about the sheeple. So the self-policing of the human herd goes far deeper than people in uniform or administrators of government. It starts with conditioned parents who impose their conditioning on their children and pressure them to follow their religious, political, economic and cultural norms. There is no more extreme example than those who insist that let's just skip that. It just talks about their stuff. Okay, now I just want to skip ahead to mind over masses. There are 2 techniques of mass manipulation that people need to understand if they are begin to see through the game. One I call problem, reaction, solution. Actually, I've heard a lot of YouTubers talking about this. Problem, reaction, solution. So the idea is that you create a problem, then you see the reaction from the public, and then you come up with a solution. So, it's coming. Oh, I still have 2 minutes. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of breaking this up in little parts, because it gets a bit too much for my Instagram feed, and also it's probably really difficult for you to like listen as well, because then you're like, oh, I have to click on to the next part. So what I'm going to do from now on, I'm just going to make one big podcast and just publish it onto my YouTube channel, and then I'll just make a 15-minute preview on my Instagram channel, and then you can just visit my YouTube channel, which is linked in my bio in my Instagram profile. And then, or you can just search for the particular episode. I'll give you the search title. And then I think that would just be easier. And then you could just like listen to it all in one go without having to click on each individual part. And it'll just make it easier for me as well, because then I don't have to do so much editing and uploading. And it'll just mean that I can create more podcasts easier as well, and then I don't have to keep interrupting myself every 15 minutes to try to make it into these little increments, so then it can be more flowy. So I think I'm going to start doing that now from now on. So there you go. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's get back to this concept. And so this is the last thing I'm going to touch on, and then I'm going to move on to something else. So mind over masses. So also, before I talk about this, I just want to talk about, there's this really amazing psychologist on YouTube, Richard something Grannon. Oh, 1 second, let me look up his name. Hello, I'm back. So I just looked up his name. His name is Richard Grannon, Grannon. And he's such an amazing speaker. I'm really enjoying watching his videos. He's a psychologist and he talks about mainly narcissism. And it's really, really interesting. And he has this one video how he talks about the concept of micro narcissism, like on an individual basis, but also global narcissism, and the tactics and the agenda and the manipulative systems that a global narcissism system can employ. I don't want to give too much away, but if you're interested, you can look that up on YouTube. Okay, so which is really interesting because the concept of narcissism, I was really interested in this subject back in 2018. I think that was like part of the reason why I had my awakening as such, because I had an interaction with a narcissist and I learned so much about it, how it's like a hive mentality and how they're drawn towards. Because I've like throughout my life, I've had lots of encounters with narcissistic individuals, and they like suck your energy. They're like vampire energies, and they gaslight you and they use all these manipulative methods. So, I never knew that there was such a term as narcissism. I mean, I knew of it, but I didn't know the psychology details of it. And it just made so much sense. And I think a lot of people are awakened after they've had an encounter with a narcissistic individual. And then Richard Grannon talks about, came up with I don't know if he came up with the concept, but he talks about narcons as in archons and narcissists. And I think there's some connection there because narcissists, like I read, there's like a hive mentality and they all have the same playbook. And it's so weird how they all employ the same sort of methods for gaslighting and controlling their targets as such. And it's like a hive mentality that they're all connected through and all have the same sort of, playbook as such. So very interesting. Okay, let's see. I can talk about so much different stuff and I go off on tangents, So I'm really looking forward to like creating more podcasts and talking about different things and stuff like that. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. And I really like creating these podcasts in the garden because it's just really nice and quiet and I get to do my grounding work and breathe in the fresh air and it just feels really lovely and I just really enjoy talking to you guys because it's just really nice. Okay, so let's get back to the last bit I want to discuss. Mind over masses. So I'm just going to go over it again. There are two techniques of mass manipulation that people need to understand if they are to begin to see through the game. One I call problem, reaction, solution, and the other I term the stepping stones approach. These have been used for thousands of years to advance the agenda, and together with fear, they remain the two most effective weapons of the Illuminati. The first technique works like this. You know that if you openly propose to remove basic freedoms, start a war, or centralize power, there will be a public reaction against it. So you use problem, reaction, solution. At stage one, you create a problem. It could be a country attacking another, a government or economic collapse, or a terrorist bomb. Anything, in fact, that the public will think requires a solution. At stage two, you report the problems you have covertly created in the way you wish the people to perceive them. You find someone to blame. You find an enemy as such. So you find someone or something or an organization to blame. And you spin the background to these events in a way that encourages the people to demand that something must be done. So David Icke talks about how you create a problem and then you spin the background to these events in a way that encourages the people to demand that something must be done. These are the words you wish to hear because it allows you to move on to stage 3, the sting. You then openly offer the solutions to the problems you have created. You have yourself created. These solutions, of course, involve the centralization of power, the sacking of officials or politicians that are getting in your way, and the removal of more basic freedoms. With this technique, you can so manipulate the public mind that they will demand that you do what in normal circumstances they would vehemently, can't say that word, oppose. So then David Icke talks about how the media plays their part to perfection in these public response solution scenarios. So the editor is always there to block anything that they write that is against the interests of the Illuminati, and if they insist on pursuing an unwelcome story, they find themselves looking for another job. And anyway, most of what journalists write come from official Illuminati sources. So this is how the Illuminati transmit through the media the version of these events that they wish the public to believe. These reports are blazed across the front page of the newspapers and the top of radio and television news bulletins throughout the world, and what they say becomes the norm. So if you say, it's like that expression, if you say a lie enough times, it then becomes true. And also reminds me of that quote that even if a lie is believed by everyone, it doesn't mean that it's true, or something like that. I'm butchering the quote. In the weeks and months that follow, researchers who are interested in the real truth begin to dig away. Over and over, they establish and document the proof of how the official version was a lie from start to finish. But where are their reports published? In small circulation newsletters and on radio stations that operate with a fraction of the money and audience of the Illuminati empires. So they don't have enough exposure. So these truth reports, they just don't get out and onto the masses because they just don't have that reach. So years after the official version has been demolished, it still prevails in the public mind. So if you ask people anywhere and ask them what happened, every time they will give you the official story because that is the only one they have heard. So it's like almost like propaganda, brainwashing sort of thing. The bedfellow of problem reaction solution is the stepping stones approach. You know where you intend to lead people, but you realize that if you gave them the true picture, you would once again face substantial opposition. So you travel to your destination in little steps, and each one is presented in isolation and as unconnected to all the others. It is like a drip, drip, drip to global centralization. So he just ends the chapter with the Illuminati work through every belief system, religious, political, economic, racial, and cultural, and through every side in the major debates. This reason is simple. If you want to know the outcome of a game before the game has even started, you need to control all sides. So this actually resonates with the idea that I have that, they're controlling all the sides. Like, if you think they're like above the whole, like a whole agenda, so they're pulling strings from both the light side and the dark side, the false light side and the dark side, and using manipulation so that they're like, oh, they want both sides to be fighting, and so they feed both sides. If you see what I mean. So if you imagine like a higher, controlling, being that want to control, the beings underneath their control, then they can orchestrate both sides and feed both of the sides with information to, cause discourse. So, and then he gives an example. So a manager of a football team cannot dictate the result if he only controls one side. If, however, he is managing both sides, he can decide the result before a ball is kicked. So it is with the Illuminati, the hidden hand behind the events that affect our lives and our world every day. Okay, so I'm just going to finish reading from this book. I just want to he quotes George Orwell, 1984, which I've been quoting a lot as well. So George Orwell from the novel 1984, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. That's really interesting. Who controls the present actually controls the past. And then Voltaire, history is the lie commonly agreed upon. Okay, so I'm going to stop reading from this book now. So I hope you enjoyed my little bit of discussion from this book. I might come back to it at a later time. There's a lot of information there. But now I'm going to move on to something else. I'm going to bring out my iPad so I can read a couple of paragraphs from a couple of articles that I've read. There's so much information out there, which is amazing. I mean, that's the best thing about the internet. We have access to a wealth of knowledge. All we have to do is just look and take the time to read it. I mean, that's the thing. Like, people say, why do they have this information out there? Like, the Illuminati, why? It's because of the universal law of consent. They actually, by the laws of the universe, have to give us access to this information. It's, it's part of, part of the law of the universe, because they have to warn us. But they do that through films and books and TV shows, but people don't take it seriously because it's fiction. So they think, oh, that's not really going to happen. And then other, like, truth seekers and conspiracy theorists, they see the programming in films and TV shows as warnings of what might come to pass. I mean, not necessarily will, because we all have free will and we all have the power to manifest a different timeline, but it's part of their, like, contract. They have to allow this information to be out there so that we as free will individuals have a chance to go against it. But we don't, because we don't believe it's actually going to happen, or it's just impossible because we're just individuals, and how can you go against government and stuff like that. It's really difficult. So so that's why there is all this information out there, and people are like, oh, but if you know where to look, you can find out a lot of information. I mean, the rabbit hole just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you do start on this journey, it can be very, very overwhelming. And I'm finding that right now at the moment. There's so much information I need to consume, so many videos I need to listen to on YouTube, and so many articles and books I want to read as well. So last night I was thinking, oh, there's just so much information. How do I retain all in my head and consume it all? So I've been reading articles on my iPad, and then I thought maybe I should start printing it out and then reading it on paper, so that I'm not constantly on my, iPad looking at a screen, because, we should try to limit our exposure to screen time. So I thought, oh, I could, like, print it out and then use my highlighter, because I love highlighting things when I'm reading things, just to bring out, core concepts that I can then quickly reference to. So I think I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to create a big folder and start printing out these articles and things like that, and so that I can start gathering all this research. And it just kind of gives you that psychological comfort as well, knowing that it's printed out and that you have it as a record, just in case if an article gets deleted from the internet, or or something like that, because it does happen. So, but if I have a paper copy of it, then I've got it as a record. And it's just nicer to read, pieces of paper as opposed to reading on the screen, because it puts a bigger strain on your eyes as well. So so I'm gonna do that today. I'm gonna start printing out articles and making notes that I have been doing. So that's really good. Okay, so I'm now going to use my iPad. I thought this was a good idea to discuss a couple of articles online, because I was like, oh, I really want to discuss it. Well, I don't want to read it from my phone because it's too little. I don't have time to print it out yet, but in the future I will print out these articles so then I can easily refer to them during my garden podcast. But I brought out my iPad. So this article, someone actually sent me a link to this article, and I don't believe most of it, But there are some truths that do resonate. So I basically picked out things that I found interesting, and I found that, yeah, this could be true, but then I'm going to admit I'm not going to discuss the stuff that doesn't resonate with me, that I just think, no, that's not true for my reality. I don't believe that. So this article was written by Cameron Day on August 23rd, 2013. So I'm just going to read a couple of things about the concept that he discusses. So planet Earth and much of our corner of the universe has been under a spell for a very long time. A spell which casts doubt within our minds about whether or not we are connected with the infinite source of all creation. The spell causes us to feel alone, vulnerable, and isolated, cast out from the heavenly realms into a cruel dog-eat-dog world. The spell is pure fiction, a deception of the highest order, but has taken hold deeply on this and other worlds. Intrinsic within this holographic spell is the notion that duality and polarity are natural aspects of life, and that we must serve one side of duality or the other. This elegantly simple binary imprint has become so prominent that we have lost sight of the larger holographic spell that spawned it. Indeed, we have lost sight of the hologram altogether and come to believe that it is the sum total of reality. Humans have been conditioned to worship the holographic deception and the agents that perpetuate it. This hologram has been called Maya by the Hindus, and the Gnostics referred to it as the corrupt Demiurge. So this is the first time I'm coming across the concept, the word Demiurge. Like, I never knew about it before. I find this term a highly accurate description, and from this point forward, I will refer to it as the corrupt Demiurge. I don't even know if I'm saying it correctly. I have heard other YouTubers talk about it now. Now that I've heard this concept, I can search into it a bit more. So it's Demiurge. I hope I'm saying it right. So dark versus false light. Duality of the Demiurge. In order to capture and control the widest possible spectrum of souls, the corrupt Demiurge split its agents into two seemingly opposing teams, dark versus false light. Not everyone can be a saint, so there must be room for sinners within the Demiurge, as long as everyone involved is under its spell. What matters most to the Demiurge is that we worship it or one of its agents, regardless if they are on the light team or the dark team. So there are many names of the players within this cosmic multi-dimensional drama, such as Lucifer, Jehovah, Beelzebub, Archangels, Satan. He says he's a different dude than Lucifer, stuff like that. So it's so while some of these beings play for Team Dark, some play for Team Light, and then some play for false light. So I think, some of the stuff that he says I don't agree with, but I think what happens sometimes is, there can be dark beings that are masquerading as light beings, so they could be agents from the dark side that are pretending to be angels and archangels. And that's why some people say, oh, when I asked for their true face, when I asked for, are you Christ? Are you of Christ consciousness? Are you of true divine light? Then they showed their real demonic face. So this shows that, they have the capability of pretending to be, archangels, angels, and trying to, enter people's minds, and they get channeled. So, people have to be really careful when they're channeling messages, because they could be channeling agents from the dark side that are pretending to be of the light, that are pretending to be angels or pretending to be light beings from other extraterrestrial dimensions. So, but one thing Melanie Beckler does say that, if you ask them straight out, are you of Christ consciousness? Are you of divine true source? Are you of true divine light? They have to, by universal law, answer truthfully. They cannot lie when you ask them straight out. So that is one form of protection. If you ask them straight out, are you of true divine source? Are you of true divine light? They will have to answer it and show their true form. So, okay. So then he talks about, while some of these play for the Team Dark, some play for Team False Light, they are all ultimately playing for the corrupt Demiurge that controls them. This, in essence, is the big secret of the Archons. They are not just the evil demonic beings, but also those who pretend to be angels and ascended masters. So, what is the point of all this control? The corrupt Demiurge is an entropic system of artificially induced separation consciousness that is slowly dying, and it depends on harvesting the energy from the souls incarnated within its system in order to preserve its existence. So these archons need humans to feed on. They feed on our feelings. They can feed on our joyful feelings, positive feelings, but they get the most energy from our dark feelings, from our negative feelings. So in order to harvest the largest amount of soul energy possibly, it created the dark light duality paradigm to ensure that every being incarnated on a world that is under its spell would serve as a soul battery to help keep the demiurge energized. The good souls will seek out the false light team, and the bad souls would seek out the dark team. But unknown to most of these souls, they are all serving the same system. And then what I disagree with him, he just talks about false light and dark side, but I think there's a third, which is true divine light. And he does touch on that, but within the Demiurge system, he just talks about false light and dark light. But I would like to say that there's a third one, which is true divine light team, which is working within the system. I do believe that. So, in order to keep the duality game interesting for its participants, the Demiurge set up densities of existence that initiates on the dark and light paths could ascend through. This gives the beings moving through these densities a feeling of accomplishment, when in fact they are navigating through a labyrinth of demiurgic illusion. The players at the high levels of the hierarchies know that they are in a self-serving system, but they are fine with the deal because they get to wield power and receive the energy of worship from beings further down the ladder. So, what are the spiritual hierarchies? So, most channel beings will claim to be affiliated with the false light based spiritual hierarchy. So he talks about archangels, ascended masters, and positive ETs. So I think these could be from the dark side that are pretending to be, so I'm going to change his meaning, which are pretending to be archangels, ascended masters, and positive ETs. And so basically they can masquerade as false light beings. In other words, the New Age is a multi-dimensional psychological operation designed to channel the soul energy of the believers of these teachings up to the ascended teachers. So then he talks about the concept of the Demiurge system. So he only talks about two sides, but like I said, I do believe that there is a third, which is true divine light team. So the dark side makes the false light look good. The two teams have to play their parts convincingly, and the dark team has really embraced their role as villainous scum, ready to kill and torture and do any sort of depraved thing that they can get away with. The dark side is designed to be incredibly repugnant, so that the majority of good souls will run to the other end of polarity, right into the loving embrace of one of the false lights team systems, or to a new religion with its legion of channels and masters. Earth has been a difficult planet for the corrupt Demiurge to fully control. Human beings were once very aware of the connection to infinite source and all of life, and that awareness has been maintained by spiritual individuals throughout the entire reign of darkness on this planet. Because this awareness cannot be beaten out of us by the dark forces, a plan was formed to co-opt the spiritual nature of human beings. So the next part of the article, he talks about how light workers are actually being used by the false light to siphon off their energy. And that's why sometimes light workers feel really, really drained and tired when they do certain things. And it's he talks about the false light team that's actually using them as ways of energizing them. So he talks about how you have these divine agents that are working for the true light team, and that they are specifically targeted by false light. So he talks about how, have you ever woken up more tired than when you went to sleep? So then he then talks about, have you ever woken up more tired than when you went to sleep? So many divine agents. So his definition of divine agent is an agent working for true divine light, who were recruited as light workers, report that they wake up more tired than when they went to bed, and their dreams were full of battles. During these dream missions, the spiritual false light side squeezes those they control of as much energy as they can. You may wake up with the memories of having gone on missions to battle the dark, but the end result is that your body, mind, and soul are depleted of energy which was harvested by the false light beings. And then he talks about how he revoked all agreements made with any and all beings that did not have the best interests in mind, no matter who the beings were or claimed to be. He says it sounds like such a simple thing to do, but it can be overlooked. So that's something you can do. So, if you just say it, you can say it in your mind, or you can say it out loud, that you revoke any agreements made with any beings, to just clean the slate, to start afresh, so that you don't have any contracts with beings that you might have made unintentionally, and those beings might be from false light or from the dark side. Hello and welcome back. I just took a little break because there was quite a lot of outside noise, so I've come in now inside, and I just want to finish reading bits of the article, and then I'm going to end this podcast. So we left it on this article. So this writer talks about the fight between the false light and the dark side. And he actually revoked all agreements made with any and all beings that did not have his best interest in mind, no matter who the beings were or claimed to be. And he said that this then in turn gave him, he then became a target for both the dark team and the false light team. The false light team does indeed engage in psychic warfare. It's just different, and it's more subtle than their dark brethren. Okay, so the next part of the article, which really captured my attention, and this is what somebody in the YouTube comments told me, and they put golden age, but they put a C in brackets before age, so it reads golden cage. So in the spiritual community, there's all this talk about the ascension process and how we're entering into a golden age. So this article, this guy is talking about the golden cage, which is really interesting. So he talks about how it's actually a false ascension, and how the golden cage is just a false ascension, and it's not really a true ascension, and it's been hijacked by the artificial intelligent matrix, which is interesting perspective. So what was that about a golden cage? The false light beings working for the corrupt Demiurge want to maintain the control over the human race. Our soul energy and agreements to live in a current cage empowers the Demiurge and the beings that serve it, and they are not going to give that up. They are not going to give that energy up easily. And we are at this very moment in a struggle for our freedom. The spiritual Demiurge wants to move us from our current extremely uncomfortable cage into a slightly more expansive state of existence, but one they are still firmly in control of. So the writer is talking about how it's going to be an illusion of an ascension, but really all it is just a larger cage. So the matrix is just going to be expanded, but we're still going to be caged. And so then he talks about a metaphor to describe the current situation, which is like if there are chickens that are in this dark, smelly chicken coop, and those that have been farming us are preparing to let us out of the coop into a larger fenced in area, but the area is still fenced in, will we be able to feel a little more free, but it's still within the control. This is the farmer's way of ensuring that they continue to feed off our energies while making us feel that we are free thanks to the kindness of our captors. So he talks about a golden cage and not a golden age, that it's a false ascension. So that's interesting. And then he talks about how, this Demiurge doesn't want us to grow on our own to a place of self-empowerment that will allow us to simply walk away from the entire control system. So this is part of the article where he challenges some channeled messages, and he talks about how they're subtly disempowering people while pretending to actually offer them an empowering solution. And then he talks about the whole savior and victim complex and how, we're all waiting for an outside savior to save us, but really it's up to us to save ourselves, and that we have sovereignty. I can still can't say that word. We have sovereignty. I can't say that word over our own, self. And so then he says that, we're sitting and waiting for the good guys to come and save us, to rescue us. But we won't be able to discern who truly has our best interests at heart, nor will we be able to actually fix our own problems for ourselves. So then he talks about solutions for the duality afflicted. So if you want to read this article for yourself, it's on the website ascensionhelp.com, and the writer is Cameron Day, and the title of the article is Why I Am No Longer a Light Worker, and it was published back in 2013. Again, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that he says, but there is some stuff that does interest me, especially about the Demiurge and the false light and the dark side. But what I don't agree with is certain things that he talks about angels. I think those are actually dark entities pretending to be angels of the light. They can easily do that. And also that, maybe he's then producing another form of duality, talking about how there's, it's a bit complicated to explain, but if you read the article, you'll understand. But then I read all the comments, and there was this one really good comment that really resonated with me, and he said that how there's truth and there's universal law ingrained in every conscious being, that we know, murder will always be wrong, cold-hearted murder will always be wrong, regardless of your religious and spiritual beliefs. If you're an atheist or anything like that, there's certain laws in the universe that are encoded in our very being, in our genetic code, and that we just know, even without any education or any outside influences, we know it is wrong. So as much as I, understand about the concept of having to transcend polarity, I do feel like there are certain things that are black and white. There are certain things that are ingrained in our universal laws that are, wrong, so I won't completely, eradicate duality and polarity, because, that is the fundamental laws of the universe, Okay, so next part of the article. So the next part of the article, he just talks about how do you go about, getting out of this duality paradigm, and he talks about self-clearing system and meditations and stuff like that, and revoking any agreements that you've made with any beings to reclaim your energy that has gone into them. And he then talks about, if you do get contact from a being, you can tell if they are only willing to communicate with beings who have transcended duality and are outside of the corrupt Demiurge. Put any being trying to contact you to the test. Question them point blank. Are you part of the Demiurge? The beings of true divine light who exist outside of the Demiurge in the real universe will happily answer your questions. Just be aware that they don't speak in language the same way that we do, as they communicate with what I call soul telepathy. And actually, that's really interesting because when I, do my angel card readings, or, I try to connect with my angel guides, I don't actually hear words or anything like that. It's like I don't know, it's just like a feeling I get, and then I try to transcribe that feeling into human words. So that's really interesting that he talks about how, true divine light beings speak through soul telepathy. Because I used to always think, oh, I'm not, channeling or anything because I don't hear anything. But now I understand it's because true divine light beings speak through soul telepathy. Okay, so the type, and then he goes on about the next part of the article is type of communication is a major indicator. The forces of true divine light that exist outside of the corrupt demiurge are not bound by the left brain, right brain dynamics and dark light polarities that define the demiurgic sub-universe. This means that they do not sound like a voice in your head. That really resonated with me because I always felt like, wow, am I really, in touch with my angel guides? Because I don't really hear any sound in my voice. I just feel a feeling. And so this part really resonated for me and really validated and vindicated me that I have, been in touch with true divine beings, and luckily not been in touch with false light beings. So he then says, instead they use soul telepathy to emanate feelings, archetypal expressions, an extremely pure quality of light that speaks directly to your soul. That I absolutely love. That really, really resonates with me. So then he says, the difference between a being of true divine light and one of the false light beings is that the former's light, the true divine light, is warm. It's enveloping, it's pure, and is unconditionally loving, whereas false light is cool, it's piercing in an uncomfortable way, it's dominant, and often overly masculine. And then he says, another major difference between false light beings within the demiurge and the beings of true divine light who are aligned with infinite source is that the divine light is not controlling, not manipulative, bossy, or judgmental in any way. Infinite source will not impose an agenda upon you, although it will support you in your chosen mission to help dismantle the corrupt demiurge. You won't be given marching orders by infinite source or beings of true divine light who operate outside of the demiurge. Demiurge? Yeah, I think that's how you say it. They won't send you on endless energy draining missions in your dream time, and they won't ask you to do something that will result in loss of your soul energy, unlike the imposters in the false light team. The beings of true divine light are supportive, loving, nurturing, and they care about you as an individual. You are not just a cog in a machine to them, for they understand that you are a vitally important aspect of an intricately interconnected creation. They have the utmost respect for those of us who volunteered to incarnate into the beast system of the corrupt demiurge in order to help dismantle it from the inside. So that's really interesting. I really like that point, how he says that there are beings who decided to incarnate into the actual system of the corrupt demiurge in order to help dismantle it from the inside. So then he says, indeed, there must be divine agents working both from within and outside of the corrupt demiurge in order to dismantle it. So I really, really like that. So that resonates for me. And then he finishes the article by saying that he actually urges you to drastically increase your skepticism and fine-tune your discernment. Apply your intuition and logic to information that you receive and ask yourself, what is the agenda here? So that was really interesting because that really helped me as well. Because now I question everything and I'm like, what's the agenda? Why would this be happening? You got to look at from like a overview perspective, like go above the whole situation and just really look at it from like a bird's eye view, looking down or looking at it from a completely like from a different planet and looking down and seeing what is the agenda happening here, what is the agenda. So that really helps you to then transcend polarity and duality and look at it from a neutral standpoint, a neutral observer, because that is where you then find peace and you don't get emotional. And it actually reminds me of that TV show which I absolutely loved, the Fringe. It was brilliant. And in Fringe they had these beings that were called observers. So they would just observe key events in history, and I don't think they necessarily would interfere, but they would just observe. I think some of them did then interfere, and then it kind of messed with the timeline and stuff like that. I can't remember, but I highly recommend, if you've never seen Fringe, it's a brilliant science fiction TV series. I absolutely loved it. So you're in for a treat. So check it out. I watched it many, many years ago. Okay, so he then says, apply your intuition and logic to information that you receive and ask yourself, what is the agenda here? There is indeed a very large multidimensional conspiracy at work on this planet, and it draws power from us by pushing us into one spectrum of polarity or another. You'll find examples of this everywhere. Like whenever there's conflict, you can see that there will be two sides, and both sides will be fighting for their rights or for their beliefs. And so it'll be like this dualistic fight between one side to another. And you see it everywhere, like, in commercials, in people's beliefs, in people's diets, religion, philosophy, socioeconomic beliefs, it's everywhere. This, like, once you're aware of it, you're like saying, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. Like, I can just give you a commercial example, like Amazon and Netflix, Netflix Prime and Amazon, Netflix versus Amazon Prime, or Coca-Cola versus Pepsi, Burger King versus McDonald's, Apple versus, Windows, Microsoft, sorry. So, and then you have examples in films like Star Wars, the light versus the dark force and the light force, but the force is all one thing, and then you've got the light side and you've got the dark side. And there's this really good YouTube channel that I've started listening to. I think it's called the Overwatch channel, and he talks about how the force is the Demiurge, and then you've got the light and the dark side fighting with each other, and it's just constantly over and over and over again. Okay, so apply your intuition and logic to information that you receive and ask yourself, what is the agenda here? Oh, sorry, I just said that. Anyone urging you to choose a side simply hasn't woken up to the fact that both sides are two halves of the same coin that is controlled by the corrupt Demiurge. And then he urges you to discuss these ideas with those close to you and look for ways that you may have been manipulated by the false light in the past. It's nothing to be ashamed of. The false light beings are amazingly skilled liars and manipulators. And then he finishes it by saying, most of you reading this have already chosen to be a divine agent and incarnate for the purpose of dismantling the demiurgic control system. You have already made your choice, and now you need to carry out your individual mission. In order to do that, it is vitally important to sever all ties with false light beings. Take some time to regain energy and strength if necessary, and ask your divine inner self to reveal to you what it is that you specifically need to do. And then he says, stand strong in the true light of your divine inner self and infinite source. So again, this article is from the ascensionhelp.com, and the writer is Cameron Day. Again, I don't agree with everything you wrote in the article. A lot of stuff I completely disagree with and it does not resonate. But there's some snippets which I've discussed in this episode that does resonate. And it's just given me another perspective of reality, basically. I'm open to reading information from all different perspectives and then figuring out what resonates for me and what doesn't. So I'm on a mission to figure out what is our reality. So I'm like that channel, Overwatch channel, he talks about how he's investigating reality and how he talks, how he studies, everything and just keeps in an open mind and does research on his own. So, yeah. Thank you so much for listening, and I will end this podcast right there. I'm wishing you a lovely day, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thanks again for listening. I really appreciate you. Bye for now.